to okay. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this, and thank you for the lively chat. I appreciated seeing all those notes. So I'm Judith Helfand. I was the director and one of the producers of the movie. And like I said, how do you prepare for disaster? Well, it depends where you live. And I don't think that's changed at all. That's an evergreen problem. And as we know so well today, with the hurricanes that are going on in Florida and all those people in Maui that are struggling to figure out what to do next. And I mean, just countless places right now where there's, suffering from big, huge problems. But as we know from this movie, people are suffering underlying problems all of the time without getting much press at all. So with all of that in mind, we thought, it would be good to just sort of stand up and take a stretch, but maybe we could do it in silence and think about everybody right now who is suffering from these climate disasters, which we've ignored for a very long time, and at the same time have ignored the everyday systemic crises that determine who suffers the most from these. Okay, thank you. So what I would love, before I turn it over, I would just, if you have some thoughts or feelings before we hear from this really extraordinary panel, we'd really love to hear from you. So, you could do that in the chat. You could talk about how, in a few words, how this links up to your zip code or where you are and your zip code and what this is making you think about or what this is making you want to work on. And as we see that perk up and flow up, we will pass it on. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Judith. My name is Dr. Howard Ehrman. I'm a former assistant health commissioner here in Chicago and one of the co-founders with several other people here of the People's Response Network. First, we certainly really want to thank Judith for all this incredible work she did over so many years to really go out to the people, which is one of the fundamental bases of public health. For those of you who can stick around beside putting questions and comments in the chat, which we really hope you do, there will be time to ask questions verbally after the panel. So first, I'd like to introduce the chair of the People's Response Network, Lynette Sims.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Howard. I'm Lynette Sims. I'm the chair of the People's Response Network. And the People's Response Network, we've been showing this film as a way to get people interested about the heat mapping project. So this year, the People's Response Network, along with other community-based organizations in the city and the city of Chicago, we worked on the Chicago heat mapping project. So for PRN, we thought the best way to recruit people is to remind people of the devastating impacts that heat has. And Judith's film beautifully captured that. So we showed it 4 times here in Chicago in person. Each audience had a different reaction. Some people felt, motivated to do something and, signed up for Heat Watch to be volunteers. Some people were saddened because they actually lost a family member in 1995. So that's the only thing I want to capture for now, PRN, and why we thought it was very important to show this film and the need to continue to show the film, because in Chicago, we just had a heat wave 2 weeks ago, and now we're gonna experience another heat wave starting this weekend.
Thank you so much, Lynette. We're very happy to have with us one of the stars of the film. I have had the honor and privilege of knowing Orrin Williams for the last 35 years as a friend and as an inspirational leader to the question of food and food systems. Orrin is the founder of the Center for Urban Transformation and is the food systems coordinator at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Thank you so much for being here, Orrin, sorry.
Hello. I'm always intrigued by the film and always see stuff that I don't think I saw before. But anyway, I'm also reminded of how little has been done and how complex the issues related to any of this really are, and the fact that we're in not just a climate situation, but also a poly crisis, if you will. So much contributes to this. And I'm not going to be long-winded. I mean, even the fact that the United States has 800 bases around the world contributes mightily to climate change, but also knowing that many of the solutions are related to architecture and building science and all kinds of things that we could and should have been doing. I wish we could have been doing them from the time Judith actually started on this film. But there's so much work to be done to mitigate all of this stuff that I don't even know if we have enough people to actually do the work. And also questioning priorities. Judith laid it out in the movie again. You know, how much of your tax dollar going to the feds, or in particular, go to the US military adventure across the planet, where we have the biggest military budget by far. And the next 11 or 12 countries make up, combined would be number 2. So what are we doing? What are we doing? And don't fall for the window commercials about all you need to do is change your windows, right? The person power that we could employ, the training, the person power, the materials, you know, it's real interesting and staggering. And when I can go out in my backyard and my neighbors on either side say, "Can you teach me how to grow food?" Right? What are we going to do? And the conversation goes beyond what are we going to do if COVID comes back, right? Or we have another pandemic. But you saw, you know, even in Judith's movie, what happens if there's a huge earthquake? What happens if Yellowstone blows its stack and you're dependent on getting your food from California, and 99% of the land and production in Illinois is devoted to corn and soybean because of our geography that allows us to put that stuff on boats and on barges and ship it around the world. That's just indicative of all the kinds of things that we need to come together around and focus on and be honest about the depth of the crisis we face and all of the things that we need to deal with. We talked to agronomists today about how many collard greens you can grow in a 5-gallon bag and how many plants do you need to provide food for people, for a family of 4. I mean, it's that simple, but it's also very, very, very complex. Who's going to audit the energy of all these buildings? A rooftop on City Hall? Come on, really? What about the roof on my building? What about insulating that? What about insulating, not even replacing the windows, just doing everything that you can to insulate our buildings so that we don't lose heat or cooling or whatever the case may be. I mean, it's funny, you know, being in Chicago, I used to look forward to summer. Now, are we gonna like not look forward to summer anymore? I'm gonna stop there. I mean, for me, it's just too much to cover in the time, and I appreciate Lynette and Howard and the work that they've done, and certainly appreciate what Judith has done and tried to do, and the conversations we've had for almost 20 years now. So I'm gonna turn it over to the rest of the panelists. Thanks for having me. Any questions, you know, feel free to ask them. Feel free to reach out outside of this. Always interested in talking to people about solutions. I'm not a revolutionary anymore. I'm a solutionary.
Thank you so much, Oren. All revolutionaries have to be solutionaries now more than ever. 15 months ago, the People's Response Network was very, very excited to listen to a keynote speaker at the largest renewable energy conference in the United States in Wisconsin. And that keynote speaker is with us today. Shamikia Nichols is the Executive Director of Solidarity based in Highland Park, Michigan, right outside Detroit. So welcome, Shamikia, and thank you for coming.
Thanks so much for having me. Dr. Howard, I lost you there for a sec.
Oh, we're here. Yeah, we can hear you.
Do you have a prompt specifically for me? I feel like Mr. Irwin did a phenomenal job of just like sharing experience, and I was just chiming in on the chat, agreeing with a lot of what has been said in terms of government contributing to climate change and playing the game of putting the blame and responsibility on residents as opposed to taking accountability and doing their part. Here in Highland Park, our organization began about 10 years ago in an effort to restore about 1,000 residential streetlights that were repossessed due to a municipal debt that was owed to our energy monopoly, DT Energy. But through attempting to restore those lights and looking at a lot of the red tape that we um, that we got from not only the local government but also at the state level, just in terms of policy, we realized we need to have more self-determining solutions. And so we attempted to do the weatherization projects. We attempted to do a number of utility assistance programs and a lot of direct action, and even trying to support people becoming more aware of the policies that were trying to offset holding DTE accountable. And so we eventually got to the point where we took it to the Michigan Public Service Commission, which all of our states have them. And it's a way to hold commissioners accountable for changing those policies and legislation. And at the very least, being able to regulate in a way that is way more firm to allow us to have the self-determination. One of the things in the film that stood out to me was the fact that a lot of folks are just not being they're not taking the initiative according to government, and that is not the truth, especially here, at least in my community. There are a number of urban farms. There are a number of folks that are excuse me, educating neighbors. They're galvanizing communities, mobilizing at the policy level, and then also just on the ground at the grassroots level. And there's still obstacles. And so I think what stood out the most for me in this film was the fact that it's going to take a respect for the efforts that are happening on the ground. I have a perspective that Black leadership, just like when environmental justice first began, the term was coined, is going to be led by the people and not by outside entities. And so I think that with upholding one another, galvanizing more often, more frequently in spaces like this, we'll be able to advance those solutions that we need. And the one thing I want to leave folks with is we don't need permission to thrive and survive. That is our human right, and so is food, water, health, and a number of the things that you know we are honestly paying a lot for right now. And so I just wanted to kind of leave folks with that. I'm not sure who to kick it off to next.
Well, that's okay. We'll do that for you. Thank you so much, Shamiki, and we hope that you'll be able to stay with us to the end of the program and maybe answer any people's questions. Earlier this year, Lynette Sims made direct contact with the people of Mississippi when a massive set of tornadoes hit that state, and we're fortunate to have Leo Carney, who is the co-founder of American Descendants of Slavery and also Mississippians for a Green New Deal, and is a chef. So thank you so much, Leo, for being with us.
Thank you, Howard and Lynette, and thank you, Judith and Kathy. And I appreciate you guys for giving me this opportunity, and appreciate that this film again. It just really opens my eyes to a lot of the disparities. Like she spoke about the systemic racism that that predates all this is what happens. And so just after working with Lynette and with PRN over the last few months, it kind of piqued my interest as far as our rapid response efforts. And I kind of went back to Katrina. When Katrina hit, there were a lot of people who died after the storm, and now I'm kind of connecting the dots, like we're saying. A lot of those deaths came because people were exposed to extreme heat after Katrina. And so as we move forward in our rapid response efforts here in Mississippi after the tornadoes, and people have died. And so I kind of question, the numbers. I know they don't track. I don't think they're tracking the numbers as far as the deaths that are attributed to the extreme heat. A lot of times we look at those deaths and they say, they may have happened, because of, like you said, the pre-existing conditions, but the underlying issue is the poverty, right? And so that's what I look at when we go into these areas like Moss Point and we go into Rolling Fork and Silver City. These are some of the most impoverished areas across Mississippi. And so, I would like to personally, use this information to try to gather or galvanize my community as far as trying to get policies, much like the ordinance that you guys did in Chicago. And so, I'm excited about the information that I've gathered, and I want to try to use this as a mechanism to try to get some policies for the people in my community here in Mississippi. So thank you guys, and I definitely would like to keep and continue this work going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leo. And I think Leo has been a huge addition to what we're trying to do, and that is to build a national people's response network. We are not a formal coalition. We are not an organization. We're a network of grassroots organizations, and Leo has been a great addition. Thank you, Leo. Next, last but not least, is Dr. Raul Contreras, who is professor of Latino and Chicano Studies at Indiana University, Gary, a member of Black Lives Matter, Gary, and a co-founder of the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization in Chicago, and also the People's Response Network.
Hello, everyone. I guess the first thing to say is, like it's been said a couple of times, real appreciation for this film and Judith, who directed it. This is the third time I've seen it, and I think someone else said, I think it was Oren, that every time I see it, there's more that I see. But each time the central, the power, the strength comes out in just how it exposes the connection between nature, in this sense, heat, climate warming, and et cetera, and racism, frankly, and the poverty that characterizes this country. All the politicians throw out the word now that they can't, they have to, it's just, everybody talks about racial disparity. All those politicians don't do anything, but this video, it's something that the story it tells has to be spread, because you really see in this film the inseparable relationship between what's happening in terms of our natural environment now and the human system created racism and poverty of the society. In terms of specific things, what to do, so like Lynette talked about the fact that I'm part of People's Response as well as a member of Meet the Neighbors, a community organization here in Little Village in Chicago. But anyway, Lynette brought up about the heat mapping that we're doing. And I think equally important is we still have a resolution out there about reconstructing our public health department. I can't think of anything else that would be more important than actually creating real, genuine public health departments in terms of like preparation and what has to be done. And we've discussed this in our group, and we want to make it clear that we're not talking about even the old thing that was there, but a real humanized public health department, community-based, and I think that's the state of public health, is only more or less as bad as here in Chicago, every damn major city in this country. And so that's an important part that we should be doing, is promoting and being behind and supporting at every level the return and the reconstruction of public health departments. Other specific things that came to mind is that I was thinking that a codification of what disaster preparation is something that should happen. It's like, well, what is it that we should be demanding on an infrastructural level from the city? The locations, the buildings, the spare generators. That's right. The places where cooling centers can be. There ought to be a specific codification of what we demand, and from, say, the city of Chicago when we're here, but that is also a model for nationwide, because we're not alone in what is happening, obviously, and the more we create ideological network in the sense that we're all fighting for the same thing or demanding the same thing, that obviously facilitates the construction of actual human networks among ourselves. Some other specific things related to this is networking. Like Howard said, we're a network, and he brought up the example of Leo and what we're doing, and we've all got to do this. And there's people here from different places here tonight, and there should be a common sort of sense that we're engaged in the same sort of task. And so we should be speaking with each other and supporting each other and passing ideas out among each other. And I think networking also has to come out in another sense, in the sense that I teach a class on it's called environmental catastrophism. And the first thing I bring out is to talk about the fact that the environmental crisis is three-dimensional. It's scientific in the sense there's a science to what is happening, but there's an ideological, political dimension to it, in the sense that the reason we haven't done anything in this regard for the last 30, 40 years, when we've known what was going to be happening, is because of the decadent political system we have. And so our networking should be external, not just toward other people engaged in this specific thing of disaster preparation, but also the building of alternatives to the political, the actual structural political systems we have to deal with. I guess that's what I would be saying, have to say, and I'll pass it on to whoever else is going to be speaking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raul. And now it's my pleasure to introduce my big sister, one of my two big sisters who are here, and that's Dorothea Manuela, who also with myself is also a member of a new group the last year or two called Radical Elders. We would really encourage anybody 55 years or older to join with us, and happy to now hear from Dorothea.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Welcome to share with us this range of emotions. First, from the alarming and very relevant to what's happening today's documentary film. So thank you, Judith, and your colleagues and the people of Chicago for sharing the story. Also followed by our very dynamic and committed, to social change warriors that we heard from. This raises a lot of emotions and a lot of what's going on today. And I certainly am moved by the film and the presentations. This section, Howard and I, as you just heard from him, he's one of the co-founders of the People's Response Network, are going to facilitate this section. Unfortunately, we have a time limit and are only able to respond to 6 live questions. But please, please, please post your questions and your comments on the chat, and the People's Response Network will respond to every single comment and question after this gathering. We ask that each person that asks a question, that the duration of the question be 1 minute. If you have a specific panelist that you would like to pose a question, please indicate that. Otherwise, you can just pose the question to the panel in general, and one of the members will respond, and they will respond within a 2-minute duration. If you begin to go over your time, I will politely say thank you and ask Howard for the next question. The next section that we're going to have that follows this one is very important, because that's where we need all of our engagement. And I can feel, people's energies and inspiration and motivated by what's going on, simply because we can apply some of what we saw in that film today. And we have to work together to make the changes, because it impacts all of us. I am Dorothea Manuela, and I am a Radical Elder, and I'm also a member of the organization Radical Elders. So I would like, Howard, if you could please call for the first question.
Yes, if anybody would like to ask a question, please either physically raise your hand if you're on camera, if your camera works. If your camera doesn't work or you don't want to use it, please type your question in the chat. If you can direct the question, like Dorothea said, at one of our speakers, please do so. Or if you just want to ask a general question, that's fine too. Don't be shy.
Okay, let's not be silent. Let us speak up. So can we please have the first question?
Question, comment. Alex, go right ahead.
Thank you. I
And if you want to introduce yourself, that would be good to just say, you want to say who you are.
Thank you very much. My name's Alex Kalfayan. I'm based out of Madison, Wisconsin. I've been working with the group Healthy Climate Wisconsin that's focused on climate justice. And we, definitely have different places that have different outcomes. And that's obvious. But I've been wondering about people during the COVID pandemic saying that, oh, there will be disproportionate impacts on communities of color, and that reducing the political will for addressing those crises. And that's what we certainly see with heat in this situation. And I've always wondered about having a rotation set up between different communities for public health impact assessments, like Lynette Sims was saying about reminding people of the impacts of heat and how that is disproportionately spread in different areas, but to have a rotation between different states with different demographic backgrounds. So like have university
Thank you
in
very
Iowa.
much, Alex. Will a member of the panel please respond to Alex's question?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to it if I could. Hi,
And
everybody.
remember that you have 2 minutes to respond in.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me. My name is Matt Brandon. I'm with an organization here in Chicago called Operation Neighborhood Safety, which is a collaboration of 15 neighborhood groups, NFPs on the south side of Chicago in Chatham, Greater Grand Crossing, Woodlawn, South Shore, and West Chesterfield. And networking is exactly the purpose of Operation Neighborhood Safety. I think that the struggle, and let me say this to Judith and Kathy, thank you so much. Judith, like Oren said, when I see the film, each time I see the film, I see something different. But the two things in the film that stand out the most in my mind, one is when Oren talked about the gun and the tomato, and the other is about the picture that you saw during the heat crisis when the Chicago police rushed to turn off the fire hydrants that the children in the inner city were cooling themselves with, while the elite downtown had Buckingham Fountain blowing water in the air and cooling them off whenever they wanted to walk by. Very powerful, very powerful. And I think that speaks exactly to what it is, as Alex just talked about, the differences, one, whether it's heat or food or flood or cold, the communities impacted are impacted because, as this film points out, of poverty. So I think that the perfect way to move forward is to address some of those issues that impact us at those ground levels, at those social levels, and make us vulnerable to those outcomes when we have a heat crisis, when we have a flood. One of the most important things, and Oren's working on it, is the next big crisis in our communities, in our poor communities, will be the food crisis. So that's going to be so important for us to be aware of and to be able to address, and we need to start looking at that. But one of the things is the bottom line, the message in this film is that all of these disasters, all of these crises that come upon us can be better dealt with if we deal with the social injustice that exists in the poverty in our communities.
Howard, we need you to pick the next person to ask a question.
Angel Roman. Angel is also not just a member, but a leader of Radical Elders. And thanks so much for coming, Angel.
Thank you. It was a wonderful program. I just want to make a statement and ask Judy a question. The first statement is that the vulnerability of all these disasters is obvious for within the elder community, whether it was in Katrina, where 60% of those who died were 75 or older, even though they were only 6% of the population. In Hurricane Sandy, half of the fatalities were 65 or older. Whether it was in Texas, where 60% of the 246 deaths, people were 60 and older. And if you go to Puerto Rico in Maria as well. So given that, I guess, and society's, I guess, response to elders, Judy, do you have any I guess, help for us in terms of how we can organize? And secondly, are you working on any new projects? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Well, I'd say one of the new projects that we've been working on is actually just trying to continue to utilize this film and not just make it available, because making it available is fine, but actually using it in a very strategic way. And we found one thing that we think is really, really important. And I think most of the cities that a lot of you are from, could actually utilize this idea. So starting in May of 2018, and then May of 2019, and then, during that summer of 2019, and then continuing since, and particularly in the wake of the George Floyd murder, there's been a whole movement across the country of different jurisdictions. So that could be cities, that could be counties, that could be, a public health department. It's any kind of entity, really. Some of them are really elected officials and they make policy. But what has happened is they have declared racism a public health crisis. And so myself and Kathy thought, wow, in the film, I am trying to kind of question whether it's possible to redefine and reframe disaster. Because if you reframe disaster, let's just say as the long-term impact of structural racism and extreme poverty or isolation of poor elders, if you redefine it as a public health crisis, or you redefine it as a problem it's a disaster, then you could start to kind of say, well, maybe we should really examine our disaster preparedness. So when you reframe something as a public health crisis, now at least I want to believe, as particularly because of COVID, that people understand what a public health crisis is, or what a public health emergency is. So we started to question, well, there's all these over 250, almost 270 jurisdictions across the country declared racism a public health crisis. Chicago, Cook County being one, and the city of Chicago being the other. And in fact, the new mayor, when he was on the county commission, was one of the sponsors of that. So if one is to go back, I'm sorry. So I'll just end it by saying the country just said, or in May, decided that they could pull off the public health emergency moniker that was attached to COVID. And with that came all sorts of resources that just went away. But those were extraordinary resources. So, but we did declare a public health crisis in all of these cities. So if your organizations were to push to say, okay, let's really, if we're going to consider it a public health crisis, let's reframe how we do disaster preparedness through racism as a lens, I think that might be a solution.
Thank you very much, Judith. And again, I encourage you to continue your questions and comments with the individual panelists or the general panel on the chat. Can we have the next question, please?
Again, please raise your hand and or type your question in the chat, or if you want to make a comment, this is the time.
Well, I'm looking at your faces and I know that there's a lot going on and a lot of emotions that we're trying to grapple at this time. But it would be good to hear from you, hear how the impact of the documentary film and the presentation from our speakers, and also the comments that are being made right now. So please, let's hear from you.
We have Angela Thomas with her hand raised.
Oh yes, go right ahead.
I just have a comment. I had family in Katrina, and my mother was born in New Orleans, raised in Louisiana, and she was so traumatized because of the difference in response. We say hurricane, my mama says high water. That's what they call it. Yes. And the fact that the people didn't come. Now for me, I'm 60, my mother's gonna be 81. Looking at that difference of how people responded back then compared to now, compared to, in my family, the men's side hustles was gardens. So we had gardens here in Oakland real strong until like the 90s. We don't do that anymore. And we had the elders around and we don't have that anymore. So I'm doing this yin and yang, and I realized I grew up in a bubble. Here in Oakland, I had country folk, but it was different. And I think if we, those of us that have that charge, go back and reconnect some of that, because that's how I look at all of it. There's no silver bullet. It's a bunch of little pieces. and we just all have to do something.
Thank you very much, Angela. That's an excellent comment. And it also reminds us about our power and how much more powerful we are if when we unite and fight back. One of the things that's obvious, the question that I have, and it's probably rhetorical, is did we learn any lessons from the 1995 heat crisis in Chicago? And we see that it's being repeated, not just in Chicago, but certainly a big disaster there, and that it's going to be spreading to the rest of us that are here today. So can we have another question, please, or comment?
I see Harry Richardson
Dr.
is
Bob.
trying to unmute. Can you unmute Harry Richardson?
Harry?
It looks like,
Yeah.
well,
There's
Yeah.
also a question in the
Not
chat
seeing
too.
a way to unmute.
Is there a way to unmute Harry? Did he raise his
I'm
hand?
not seeing
Oh,
a
it's
way.
Barbara. I just wondering if people wanted to compare it to the deaths from European heat waves. I don't know if that's interesting.
With Paris in particular, perhaps.
I can take a shot at that. So I think what happened in 2003, in which there were probably 90,000 people who died over 2 weeks in Europe, in France and other countries, is primarily because of the fact that people have far fewer air conditioners in their own homes or apartments than in the United States. That has changed since that heat wave. But still to this day, based on equal incomes, there are many more Europeans who do not like air conditioning or don't want to get it and or can't afford it. Even though the cost of electricity is about the same in most places, in some places cheaper. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is just a whole history of never experiencing anything quite like this in many centuries, not just over the last couple of generations. We know that there are health systems that are overall better in Europe on a relative scale. However, this is not primarily about medical care. That comes after the fact. It's primarily about people who are out in their homes, out working outside with governors who refuse to give people water breaks, et cetera, et cetera. So when we talk about public health, we talk about people going out to where people live, work, go to school, play and pray. And that health system like that in Europe has deteriorated tremendously under neoliberalism under the last 40 plus years.
Thank you. Thank
Could
you,
I-
Howard. I believe there's a question in the chat. Can someone read it for us, please? Kathy or Howard?
The one from Sheila Mitchell, Dorothea.
The question that you referred to that's in the chat.
And also from VS too. VS also.
Okay, well, let's deal with the first
Okay.
one.
Susan, do you want to read them? I mean, I've answered the ones in the chat, actually. I think Raul has a comment. If folks feel like their questions weren't answered in the chat, please let me know. But I think all the questions in the chat have been answered.
Okay, we have time for just 2 more questions and responses. Raul, you have a comment, please?
Yeah, it's a comment because people were quiet there, and it was a comment in relation to your point, Dorothea. Have we learned anything? And I was sort of thinking, yeah, actually we learned a whole lot, but you also got to break down that word we, it's like,
Yep.
not they, that's what I call they, just quote unquote the politicians, but it's much broader than that. They've learned that they've got to rationalize it different. I was watching something the other day, just because of I forget which disaster, but the commentator was, again, the mayor of the city posed it like, say, they can't ignore race. They have to say it, that there's racial disparity. They say the words and they say, but the message that was coming out is this was a natural disaster. It's like they separate the things in the sense of like, yeah, they talk about race, but then when they talk about what happened, oh, this came down on all of us and da da da, and it's heat and it's nature, you know, and anyway, the method of rationalizing their inactivity, their lack of dealing with it has quote unquote improved, I think, from their point of view, from the way they coming across. And then I think we have also learned, you know, a lot, at least the people in this room and people like we've learned a lot too about what since that time. Maybe we haven't really been figured out how we implement our knowledge. But that's what this is all about, you know, this meeting we're having here. Unlike the quote unquote, the politicians, we do have a sense of what we have to do. And just even the suggestions and things that were brought out here. So anyway, I agree with you, Dorothea, we haven't learned anything, but I was just looking at that same question from a different direction.
Thank you, Raul, for the comments. Do we have time for one more question?
We got Oren, Oren with the last question.
Thank you.
Not a question as much as a response. Just want to remind people that we always talk about politicians and those folks, but let's talk about who owns them, right? You know, the real estate lobby, the pharmaceutical lobby, all of these entities that impact, and the reason why we haven't moved anything forward. Back to Raul's point, we know a lot, and we know how to deal with this stuff. And we can, we could have mitigated any problems, again, like I said, if we had started this process 20, 25, 30 years ago, even in terms of just building science and architecture and how we manage the built environment, you know, a lot of this stuff wouldn't be happening now. But let's not forget who motivates the lack of movement. The fossil fuel industry, the real estate, for all of that. I'm not going to repeat myself, but just remember the hierarchy that we're really dealing with.
Well, Oren, you really they're repeating yourself, you're emphasizing, and thank you so very, very much. I want to thank everyone for their patience and for their participation. We are thanking you and encouraging you to please make your comments in the chat and ask your questions. The People's Response Network will respond to it. Now we're going to go into the next session, which is a very important session. This is where the discussion of the next steps, and this is where your participation is I can't emphasize, utterly important is the word that comes up for me. And the two people that are going to be speaking to you on this point is Lynette, who is the chairperson of the People's Response Network, and also Dr. Howard Ehrman, that is a co-founder of the People's Response Network. Thank you again so very, 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 very much. I'm very inspired and enthusiastic about our next coming together to continue this conversation and our survival.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dorothea.
Thank you. That was a great transition. So now we're at the point of next steps, because we didn't want to host this film screening, you know, without, you know, having tangible next steps that we all can do, because we all can work together and come up with our own solutions. So People's Response Network, we host meetings every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you have the time, feel free to join us, because we are still doing the work in regards to heat mapping, working with the city with the heat vulnerability index. That's the second phase, in addition to free masks, free N95 face mask distributions, and our upcoming new ordinance, getting that introduced and hopefully passed. In addition, if anyone is interested in hosting a virtual film screening, feel free to email us at People's Response Network, PRN, coalition@gmail.com. We will happy to help co-host that experience with you. And I'm gonna pass it to Dr. Howard.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lynette. Just trying to put in something in the chat so that people are familiar with it. So again, I want to thank everybody who helped organize this. There were, about 12 of us who did this together from across the country. In particular, again, to really thank Judith and Kathy, but everybody else, from Dorothea in Boston to people on the West Coast, to Leo in Mississippi, to Shamikia in Detroit. This is a proposal in the chat that we sent through our own network, working together with the most progressive council people in Chicago, which are called Alder people. This was sent to the mayor of the city of Chicago this morning and his executive team. This is exactly what's different now from 1995. Last week, we had a heat index of 116 2 days in a row. That was the second highest in history. The only one higher was 120 at the time of the film that Judith made. The only difference that happened in the city of Chicago last week was to extend the hours of cooling centers from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. There are only 6 cooling centers for 2.8 million people. That's 450,000 people per cooling center. The policies in those cooling centers are not determined directly by the mayor, but by the Office of Emergency Management and Communication, which, as you saw in the film by Judith, was established by Mayor Daley, the first one in the country. Now they exist in about 8 cities. That basically is the militaristic arm of the equivalent of FEMA, Department of Homeland Security, that's run primarily by 95% white males who are former military people or in the police. Their policy is to kick people out who go to cooling centers and fall asleep, which is a natural reaction of the body when you go from heat to cooling. The other thing that happened was 12,000 bottles of water were distributed to 350,000 students and teachers in the Chicago Public Schools. That was it. That's the difference in 28 years from what Judith showed in her film. So that's why we've come up with what we call acute heat emergency plan. We hope that the mayor and his team will at least implement part of this. But the key here is not just to open up more cooling centers, which should be 24/7. The body basically accumulates heat as the day goes on, and 90% of the deaths, as documented by our brother who's no longer with us, Dr. Steve Whitman, happen at night because of urban heat islands. 90% of deaths happen at night, whether it's in Phoenix or Chicago or in Mississippi. It's not just a matter of opening up more cooling centers, it's a matter of going out to the people. So we've proposed a combination of city workers who are non-police, along with community-based organizations, religious groups, labor unions, to go door to door and to find people with actual measurement of their body temperature, with their permission, of course, and their home apartment temperature, and get them to cool places to survive. So that's our proposal. And just real briefly to show you what we think this is all about. Hold on 1 minute, please. Sorry. I don't know if Kathy can, oh, here we go. I found it. Okay, just real briefly to sort of summarize where all this is coming from and where we're going. These are photos of the oldest living footprints of humans that we know of in Liatola, Tanzania, where a Tanzanian anthropologist took me to in 1996. Why are we showing this picture? Human beings have figured out how to survive, but the only way to survive is collectively in community. Individuals have a far fewer chance of survival, no matter where it is in human history. We think more than ever, we need to unite to thrive and survive at the grassroots, in our communities, in our workplace, where we go to school, play and pray. We think we have to do this for prevention, preparation, response, and rebuilding, all the way from Maui to Mississippi to Chicago to Mali and Turkey. On the left are Native Hawaiians who've developed their own network for mutual aid and solidarity on the island of Maui. They are trying to cooperate with government officials, but government officials, like everywhere, have made life harder and are opening the door for colonial gentrification. On the right are workers who are both restaurant workers and outdoor workers in Texas, who are basically fighting for safer conditions in lieu of heat waves. Last Saturday and Sunday, Ecuadorians became the first country in the world to actually vote to stop mining in one of the most ecologically diverse places on Earth, part of the Yasuni Amazon National Park. That's prevention. We have to greatly expand what we know works. I'm very happy, and it's not a coincidence, that my brother Oren mentioned this. We know what works for 45 years, and that is you seal up the air places that are leaking in buildings, every building on Earth, and you put as much insulation as you can in there. That is the lowest hanging fruit to decrease carbon emissions. We must fight for these jobs to be healthy. These can be very dangerous in terms of laying in particularly fiberglass insulation, but they can be done in a healthy way at wages that need to start at least $25 an hour, hiring people from those communities that need this the most. LIHEAP and weatherization are under the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Energy. It's a combination of rules at the federal and state level, and LIHEAP has now been expanded to year-round air conditioning and or decreased electricity, but it doesn't exist in Illinois and a lot of other states. So this has to be done on a regional, local, and national basis. This is a history that is unique, but not unique to Chicago. Block clubs were established after World War I by African Americans to deal with welcoming people in the first Great Migration, particularly from those states, most commonly where people came from, Mississippi, Alabama. They are mostly of older people now, but there are now blocks throughout Chicago, not just in Black neighborhoods, where people are understanding the need to organize block clubs to thrive and survive, including the storage of non-perishable food, water, the kind of emergency kits that Shamiki and Nichols and Solidarity have been distributing in Highland Park in Michigan. This is an example of what can be done. Angel Roman, Ana, his wife, my wife, and others from Radical Elders were in this march in March of this year. One of the most important projects in the world. They have a solar microgrid of 70 buildings, houses, businesses, prioritizing people who have medical conditions like having to store insulin for diabetes, and backup batteries for 10 days. Casa Pueblo was the only place after Hurricane Maria that had power and had a solar powered radio for the whole island. Like Oren has demonstrated most of his life, the question is grow food everywhere, horizontally, vertically, in schools, based on local ancestral knowledge that exists in every community. Just got to go out and ask people. We established a program in Little Village 25 years ago where we found 150 people who had this knowledge, and we began a whole series of community gardens. People know how to do this. We need to do it, and we need to practice food sovereignty where people have local control over where food's going to get grown and to stop land grabbing by developers. 2 years ago, one of the oldest environmental justice organizations, APEN, on the West Coast, worked with SEIU, the Blue Green Alliance, to develop a document that's now been partially funded by the state of California, which has developed resiliency before disaster centers, not just in public buildings, but in community-based organizations, to not just prepare for disasters, but to have people do things to help prevent them. I think we all know what's going on in Maui. I would encourage people to look at a whole series of documentaries on Democracy Now!, where people are speaking for themselves, academics and community organizers who are Native Hawaiians organizing to stop the kind of land and water grabs we've seen everywhere, both since and before Katrina. This is a real thing that is happening already. We know that climate change, colonialism, gentrification is happening. It's still happening in the 9th Ward in New Orleans. It's going to keep happening until we unite to stop it. Lastly, we have to sort of understand the overall perspective that my best friend, Dr. Raul Contreras, referred to. This is a question now of people are expendable. 95% of people are expendable on Earth. That literally includes all of us. We're not equally expendable, but we're all expendable. If you've not seen Raoul Peck's Exterminate All the Brutes, I'd highly recommend it. But that's what we're here to stop. We're here to stop extermination, and we're here for life. So thank you very much. And please get in touch with us at prncoalition@gmail.com. And we're going to close with what we think is a really important, uplifting video. And if you have any more questions, you can put stuff in the chat while this is going. It's just a 3-minute video, and we'll take it from there.
No, it's time to say goodnight.
Yep.
Si fuera presidente, oh, si fuera presidente, vamos a president. If I was a president, when I president.
Let me be the chief executive and settle the score. Stop working people till they raggedy, then asking for more. Open doors, cut the pipeline to prison. That's the feeling I'm in. Educate the whole nation by the skin that I'm in. Black woman, stay safe and watch me do it again. Clear the cash, put the cash where it's evidently necessary. More than fried food and booze, open some libraries. Stand with my fellow man.
If I was commander-in-chief, I preach peace. A college education would be free. I close the wage gap and pay back indigenous peeps and cops would have to live in the streets they police. Teacher salaries would be like NBA players. Social workers and physicians getting great favor. Raise minimum wage, no more slave labor. The federal officials can't be penetrated. Nah. If I was a president, but I president. If I was a president. If I was a president, but I president.
If we ain't good, then what are we? Not just who we claim to be. Here we hiding under sheets. Honesty, integrity. That's what a leader breeds. Pull up the boots of mission, but down some new speed. Hey, free Mumia and my people shut down fighting for freedom. Dismantle the message that make you think it's cool. To tell a woman about her body and what she can and can't do. Bring the glass, fill it, and shine.
I'm tearing down this legislation. I'm instituting automatic voter registration. Next, I'm on the move of first mass incarceration. Putting more funding into rehabilitation. Expunging low-level drug offenses. Opening the cages and tearing down the fences. Ensuring that no person ever be illegal. And then I step down and give the power to the people. No more war, no more fear. It's time to thrive. The change is near, yeah, yeah. Me gusta la lima, me gusta limón, pero no me gusta tanta corrupción.
My first lady would beat my mom, cause she'd smack me in the head if I was dropping bombs. Get my poor black and brown kids in them cages. Then go to Congress, raise all the wages. Finally buy a car, all cash, no lease. Then I to the mayors. Universal health care, no hesitation. Then I touch the 2% new wage plantation.
If I was the president, fuera presidente.
If this was truly the land of the free and the brave, instead of stolen ground built by the hand of enslaved, and if the justice system worked on behalf of the people, then maybe my leadership would trade the future we trade. I'm let the money talk, get the reparations do. Let's rebuild the wealth and see what the next generations do. Funnel the resources to places the government orphan and criminalize their offspring for the hand of their big support. Give them access to education and access. Redistribute the equity so the working people checks that qualified immunity. Your body show them dirty politicians or the cops look at handle less intrepid. Liberate the freedom fighters in the private prison game. Grant the native nations take restraints from sovereign terrain. Give the people healthy food, clean water, hold the ice, and see what's possible. Pop respond to the it's like rock, rock.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for.
All right, good night, everybody.
Night.
That was good.
Good night, everybody. Thank y'all.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Come on in.
Good night.